Today we're going to go over a book called Simplify by Richard Koch and Greg Lockwood. This book here. This is about the second or third time that I've read this book, and basically what it tries to teach you is how do you create a star business. A star business comes from the Boston box. It was created by the Boston Consulting Group like years ago. And what it does is it puts businesses into four main categories. First category is dogs, which are non-market leaders in low-growth markets. So think of like newspapers and things like that. Cash cows, which are the largest companies in these low-growth markets. Question marks, which are businesses in high-growth markets but aren't market leaders. And then stars, the market leaders in these high-growth markets. So basically what this principle is saying is that the best businesses are stars, which hold the number one position in markets that are growing fast, which is kind of self-explanatory. The really interesting thing about this concept is that it goes on to explain that these stars account for only about 1 or 2% of the businesses overall in a market, yet they will account for over 100% of the cash generated in that market. Now, to be honest, at first, when I heard this, it sounded very dumb. It's like, how can 1 or 2% of the businesses, even if they are the best, generate over 100% of the cash for that specific market? But when you actually start thinking about it, the amount of businesses that go into a market or go into a product that don't end up making money, that end up losing money, ends up eating up all the cash generated by those other businesses that are created and aren't market leaders. And so this is why this book suggests, and this concept suggests, is that you should be always trying to create star businesses. And this is the one where investors and founders will end up making all of their money is in these star businesses, and everything else kind of gets eaten out by the risk of getting over-competed by and pushing your margins down and end up going broke in the end. So what this book's trying to do is it's trying to say, okay, how do we then create those star businesses? So this book really suggests that by doing two things. By price simplifying or position simplifying. So price simplifying is when you're able to cut the prices of products and services by more than half. So think of things like what Henry Ford did when he created Ford Motors with cars. I'm even thinking of things like McDonald's with hamburgers. So those sort of things, they're price simplifying, bringing the price down by a drastic margin that ends up providing a lot of value to their clients. And then position simplifying. This is creating a product that is a whole world of magnitude better than anything else on the market. So here you would think something like Apple, what they did when they first invented the smartphone, things like that. So how does this book suggest going about price simplifying and position simplifying? I'll start with price simplifying first, because as you can imagine, cutting prices by more than 50% is definitely not easy. And basically, if you go down that route, your whole business and whole purpose of that business needs to become, how do we bring the prices of these costs down as much as possible? And so to achieve this, it really suggests doing three things. You need to radically redesign the product and the business systems itself from the ground up completely. So you need to start basically with a fresh canvas and completely redesign this. Some of the examples it gave in the book are things like IKEA, when it redesigned furniture and how it delivers as flat packs and things like that, and it completely redesigned the entire sort of framework of furniture in a way. And then the other thing that you need to do is once you've redesigned the product and business systems, you need to start scaling it up. So start getting those benefits of scale. And what this does, it obviously gives you those benefits of having lower margins and the benefits of scale it does, but it also wards off imitators. Because as you create a really great system, a really great product, or whatever you do, there's going to be people that are going to be looking over the fence and trying to copy what you've done. And if they end up successfully doing that in, say, their country, where you haven't gone into yet, then there's a good chance that they will actually outcompete you and end up getting in there first, and you won't actually end up having first mover advantage in that country. So once you've got this model, you need to start scaling up as fast as possible. A few notes on price simplifying was that usually in a market, there can only really be one or a couple of price simplifiers, if not just one. Basically, this is because as price simplifiers grow and as they end up getting bigger, they end up getting to a point where competing with them because of the scale that they're at ends up pushing a lot of competition out. So once you actually gain a significant traction or different stronghold on that marketplace, you can hold it pretty comfortably for a long period of time, as people trying to copy what you've done have to sort of start from ground zero, and the margins and the operating costs that you've got to now at this point can make it almost impossible to compete with you without some sort of enormous expansion on their part. And so this is a real advantage on price simplifying, is that you can hold leads for a very long time. You have a very defensible position to run your business from. The other thing that I wanted to note is that when you're creating products that are 50% cheaper, I was thinking when I first heard this, I'm like, well, wouldn't that like reduce the market overall by 50%? So say an overall market of XYZ is doing, say, $1 billion in revenue. But if you cut prices by half, wouldn't that bring down the overall market size to 500 million? But that's not really true. The way to explain in this book is that as you bring down prices, the actual like need for those prices or people purchasing those prices actually increases exponentially. So let's say, for example, you bring down prices by 50%. Well, there's a chance that 10 times more people will end up buying that product, and the market grows as a result. So even though that you're doing, say, less on a sale, you end up doing more sales overall, which ends up balancing itself out. Okay, now position simplifying. How do you create a product or service that offers massively more value than anything else in the market? As with price simplifying, it's just 3 things that you need to do. The first thing it suggests is you need to increase the product's ease of use. Basically, going on the simplifying premise of the book is that there's no point in making a better product that does not make the lives of its users easier. This can include things like eliminating unnecessary features, making it more intuitive, making it smaller, more portable, easier to obtain, things like that. The next thing you need to do is you need to make it more useful. You need to improve things like performance, quality, capabilities, and customization. Just make the thing overall better in general for what it actually does. And then the last thing it suggests is making it more appealing, aka don't make it ugly. And think about how the product service will make your customers feel when they start using it and looking at it. Like, think about this when IBM was creating computers versus Apple. Apple's computers were much more sort of customized, have a bit more personality to them, whereas IBM's computers were just grey, ugly boxes. So that's sort of the other thing that you need to do when you're looking at position simplifying, separating yourself from the competition. Okay, so a few notes on position simplifying. Unlike price simplifying, more than one position simplifier can be in the market at the same time. If 2 different companies, say, take up 2 different positions and attract 2 different target audiences, they can both happily coexist together. Your greatest challenge as a position simplifier is actually going to be able to stay ahead of people that are trying to imitate your products and services and trying to undercut you. This is generally why price simplifiers keep their leads longer than position simplifiers, simply because products and services are really easy to imitate. So you really need to be thinking about how can you create a business or system around these products to help protect your lead. This is much sort of like what Apple does with its ecosystem, where you can, you have your phone and your computer and they all talk to each other in iTunes and all the rest of it that goes together. It's easy to imitate the iPhone, but it's hard to imitate the entire ecosystem that they built and getting people to move away from that. Alright, a few questions that I had as I was reading this book that I wanted to touch on. The first question that I had was, is one strategy more or less better than the other strategy? And basically the answer to this is no. Neither approach is inherently superior to the other, although price simplifiers generally seem to hold their leads for longer and have a much more defensible business model than position simplifiers, due to the facts that we just talked about before. But it can be much harder to create a price simplifying model, as it takes a lot of capital up front. So you have to grow your business incredibly fast, which means as a founder, you might have to give up a lot of your company to raise capital. And to be honest, once there's a price simplifier in the market, it can be very hard to compete with them and try to edge into it. And to be honest, that's not really I feel like the question was wrong when I really thought about it, whether one's better than the other. What you decide to go with, whether position or price simplifying, should actually depend on a few other factors. Things like, what is your company better at? What are the market factors? Like, are there competitors, aka already in the business doing the thing you're trying to do, that you're not going to be able to compete with? Or if you're looking at price simplifying, it's basically impossible to reduce prices for more than half. Think of something like Google, right? If you try to start a search engine, how are you meant to start a search engine and reduce prices more than half when Google is free, for example? I'll link to a quiz by the author on deciding which one best suits your businesses in the description. It's a quiz from in the book, but they've put it on entrepreneur.com, I believe it is. So I'll link that in the ending so you can go through that quiz. And I suggest you do it because it'll give you an idea of even like the end results. Should give you an idea, but it'll give you an idea of what sort of things you should be looking at when you're price simplifying or position simplifying, and give you a better idea of the overall principle overall. The next question I had was, can you do both at the same time? Like, why can't I be the best and cheapest at the same time? Or why can't I offer the overall best value? And the answer to this is no, but yes. So it's no if there's a fair playing field. But as if everyone's playing on the same field, then it's a no. You have to choose one or the other. But the fact is that you can do this if you have some sort of advantage over your competitors. So say, for example, a good example for this right now is Amazon, who is currently one of the cheapest and has some of the best technology in the market. And that really comes down to it. If you have an advantage that no one else has currently, like, let's say, for example, someone creates AI company and they start competing in the industry and they've built this AI thing around it and no one else has access to that AI, there's a good chance that that company will be able to do something cheaper and better than its competition. But it doesn't really last. Over time, these technologies will diffuse into competitors, and competitors will start having the same access to the same technology as they do. So eventually, the company will have to decide on which way they want to go. Do they want to become the cheapest, or become like position simplify and look at being the best? And that's generally comes down to exactly that question: is the two strategies have very different objectives. One is asking, how can I be the lowest product on the market? And the other is asking, how can I make the best product on the market? And those two sort of strategies don't end up meshing very well together. All right, my final thoughts on the book. I think this book is absolutely incredible. I think that there are a few areas, and excuse the pun, but it's simple. It simplifies some things that I feel like other books that do a better job, like the Blue Ocean Strategy and Blue Ocean Shift. I think that book does a lot better with a similar theme of making it executable and laying out frameworks. But this book does make it a lot easier to understand those principles. And a lot of times, complexity is interesting, but simple is actually usable. And I think the principles laid out in this book are definitely usable. I would 100% recommend this book to anyone who's looking to try to create a massive business or sort of take over the world, or even an investor who's looking at businesses and potentially thinking about angel investing. I'd recommend this book to anyone. I think this book does lose a little bit of... I suppose if you're like a mom and pop shop and you're just like you're happy to be like a small business in your town, it can have it's good, but I think there's other books that do a better job of helping that sort of business out. I think this book is really for those people who are trying to get that next level and really trying to become the best in their industry overall. So my general thoughts on this book is that like I think everyone should read it. But if you're just a small business and you're looking at just staying a small business, there's probably other books that I would recommend you pick up first over this one. But that is everything that I have to say on Simplify. It's like, honestly, a really fantastic book. I highly recommend it. And there's a couple other books from Richard I actually want to read as well. I think it's like 8 Printer Principle and then the Star Principle as well. I haven't read neither one of those books before, but I kind of have an idea of what the concepts are, so I plan on picking them up soon. But yeah, I hope this has been really helpful. I hope you have a better idea on like how to simplify your business. And yeah, if you want to pick up a copy for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description. And yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback. Obviously, this is the first time for me doing this format, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you have any questions on simplifying or anything else, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Remember to do all the things, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.